I married a man in a wheelchair, and he turned my whole world upside down. If you've ever thought an ordinary life couldn't be full of drama, welcome to my very not-so-ordinary version. I'm Ellie Davis, 29, community nurse, not into guys with fat wallets and tiny hearts, and absolutely zero interest in cold, mysterious types who look like they walked out of a sad detective movie. But then I met him. Monday. Light rain. My Converse were soaked, and my mood wasn't much better. I had a routine checkup scheduled for an old man living in a low-rise apartment building on the west side of the city, the kind where the elevator groans like it's screaming every time it hits the third floor. I was pushing the med cart with one hand, country music playing in my earbuds, trying not to think about the fact that I'd be eating instant noodles for the third time this week. Then I saw him. Sitting right in front of the elevator was a young man in a wheelchair. He had on an ash-colored beanie, a faded army green jacket, and a worn leather bag. His face wasn't exactly inviting. His dark gray eyes were sharp and guarded, his lips pressed tight like he was swallowing some private pain no one was allowed to touch. I stopped. As a nurse, I've got this habit of playing hero without a cape. That rescue instinct kicks in like an emergency switch. So I pulled a protein bar out of my coat pocket, walked over, and gave a small nod. "Hey there, I've got some snacks here. If you need water, I've got that in my med bag too." The man turned to look at me, slowly, no smile, no nod, just a cold, silent stare so intense I could almost hear the wind rushing past my ears. "You think I'm some kind of charity case?" His voice was low, calm, but carried weight, like every word was picked with precision. I stammered. I thought you might need some help. I'm sorry if I misunderstood." He curled his lip, not a smile, more like a silent scolding in the shape of a smirk. "So do you hand out protein bars to everyone in a wheelchair?" My face went red, like seriously red. If there'd been a hole nearby, I would have jumped right in. No, that's not what I meant. I'm a nurse. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." "Oh, I'm okay. I'd be better if it was strawberry flavored though." I froze. "What?" "The protein bar. I like strawberry." He held out his hand. Calmly, I gave a crooked smile and handed him the last one in my pocket. "Strawberry. Lucky you. You should save that kindness for someone not wearing a Rolex," he said, then turned away like nothing had happened. I glanced at his wrist. Yep, Rolex. And not the knockoff kind you find at a flea market. This was the classic model, probably worth as much as a year of my rent. He rolled into the elevator without looking back. I just stood there, embarrassed, amused, and a little confused. What the hell was that? I sighed and muttered to myself, "This city needs a sign. Warning, don't help anyone in an old hoodie. They might be richer than you think." A few hours later, I was on the 11th floor, where my elderly patient lived. Knocked on the door, waited. A tiny dog barked sharply from inside. The door swung open. But it wasn't the old man who answered. It was him. The man in the wheelchair. No beanie, no hoodie, just a crisp white shirt, neatly combed hair, and a face still cold as ice. I froze. He looked at me, eyes scanning me from head to toe like he was sizing up a product. Then he frowned. "Here to offer me another protein bar?" I gave a sheepish smile. "No, I'm here to check on Mr. Ritchie in 11B. He leaned to the side and pointed across the hall. "He's in the unit opposite. I'm the one who lives here, 11A, and I don't need any help, thanks." I practically bolted across the hall out of pure embarrassment. But in my head, I was laughing. There was something so wrong and yet so right about that guy. I didn't know his name, didn't know why he was in a wheelchair, but I knew one thing. He was the first person in years who actually made me feel curious. That night, when I told my best friend about how I mistook a millionaire for someone homeless, she nearly fell off her chair laughing. Me? I couldn't stop wondering. What's a guy like him doing in a rundown building like this? And why does he act like the world has nothing left worth caring about? The answer would come later. But in that moment, all I knew was this. The mysterious man with the cold stare and hands always gripping the wheels of his chair, he wasn't going to be just a one-time encounter. After that first meeting, full of protein bars and awkwardness, I made a decision to steer clear of him. Not because I hated him, but because I didn't like how it felt to get hit with that kind of sharp, quiet comeback. The way he was cold, observant, and somehow managed to hit me right in the ego, it felt like being exposed in the middle of a crowded supermarket. For the next week, I kept visiting that old building to check in on my regular patient. And every time, no matter how much I tried to ignore it, I always glanced over at apartment 11A. The door usually half closed, sometimes with soft piano music drifting out, sometimes just complete, heavy silence. One Friday afternoon, I was standing in the lobby waiting for the elevator when the doors suddenly slid open. He was inside, in that familiar wheelchair, eyes just like the first time, calm and unreadable, like a frozen lake. I wasn't planning to say anything, but he spoke first. "What time do you usually check on Mr. Ritchie?" I raised an eyebrow, a little caught off guard. "Around 2 or 3 p.m. Why?" He nodded. "So I can tell him to stay off the balcony. Every time you come by, he ropes me into doing stuff for him." I laughed. "Oh, well, sorry for the trouble?" "Not trouble," he replied flatly. "At least it gets me out in the sun a little." Silence. The only sound was the hum of the elevator. I glanced at his wheelchair and noticed the handlebar in the back was loose, looked like it'd been that way for a while. "This chair need fixing?" I asked, reflex kicking in from work. He looked at me, then slowly replied, "If you're trying to make up for the protein bar incident, I'm not sure the handle's gonna feel very touched." I laughed, then nodded. "All right, not because of the bar, just, I've got time." And from that one little, "I've got time," I had no idea everything was about to begin. We didn't become friends right away. Honestly, he was still about as approachable as basement Wi-Fi. But he didn't push me away, and I found that strange. Why did I want to get closer to someone who rationed out his smiles like they cost money? My visits to Mr. Ritchie turned into a few extra minutes fixing the handle on his chair, then replacing a hallway light bulb, then checking his apartment's electrical system. I didn't say much, but I started noticing the books in his place, thick ones, the kind that felt like bricks, economics, philosophy, classical music. Not exactly the type you'd expect from someone who just wore a Rolex and kept the world at arm's length. One day, I showed up early and accidentally heard music coming from his living room. Chopin. But it wasn't coming from a speaker. It was coming from the upright piano in the corner. He was playing. His fingers, though slightly trembling on the left hand, played with a softness that was steady and full, melancholy without being melodramatic. I stood silently at the doorway for a while, not daring to interrupt. "How long are you planning to stand there?" he asked without looking up. I froze. "I was just listening. Sorry. No need to apologize. But if you're going to eavesdrop, you should hide your breathing better." I laughed, for the second time. That seemed to be his style. Cold, then suddenly tossing out a line that made me feel both caught and oddly amused. One day, I brought a wooden box to his apartment. Old. Scratched up. Inside was a broken cassette player from forever ago. "I know you're good with electronics. Think you could fix this?" He opened the lid, gave it a quick glance. "This thing's from the 90s, right?" "Yes, it was my mom's," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "She passed away when I was 17. This cassette has the last birthday message she ever recorded for me." I paused. "But no player has been able to run it in years." He said nothing at first, then gave a small nod. 2 days. I didn't let myself hope. But exactly 48 hours later, when I knocked on his door, the cassette player was sitting neatly on the wooden table with a short note. "Play button's a little slow, but the voice comes through clear." I sat down right there on the hallway floor, put on the headphones, and for the first time in nearly 10 years I heard my mother's voice again. "Ellie, you are my light. Don't let anyone dim that, not even yourself." I cried. Not the kind of crying with sobs, but the kind where tears just fall. Quiet, steady. And I knew, behind that door, he was listening. From that day on, I started to understand. Behind the cold exterior was a man who had been hurt and chose silence over sympathy. And I started to notice, he didn't just fix a cassette player for me. He showed me what it meant to hold someone up quietly. When I was stressed from work, he sent me an instrumental playlist. When I got home late from a night shift, he texted just one line, "My light's still on. If you need to sit in silence, come over." We still didn't call each other friends, but we both knew something was beginning to grow. Slowly, quietly, like a song that isn't finished yet, but neither of us wants to stop listening. What we had didn't start with holding hands in a movie theater or sweet promises by the beach. It started with quiet things, like the nights I knocked on his door to borrow a screwdriver, like the mornings I left coffee at his doorstep without a word, like the way he looked at me when I told him a patient called me a cold-hearted witch just because I wouldn't let them have a donut after heart surgery. We still lived separate lives. I was a nurse. He was a giant question mark. I'd never asked what he did for a living, not because I wasn't curious, but because something in his eyes told me he'd share when he was ready. And he did. Not with long, drawn-out stories, but with every single thing he did. When I couldn't sleep, I got a playlist titled "For the Nights You Can't Shut Your Mind." When I sprained my ankle slipping on the stairs, he quietly left an ice pack, a brace, and muscle cream at my door. No card, no name. Just a small note. No work tomorrow. Patients don't need a limping nurse. I actually laughed out loud when I read it. And for the first time, I texted back, "Then who's gonna check your wheelchair?" He didn't reply, but the next day, his door was cracked open, and on the table, my favorite coffee. No one said thank you, but everything spoke louder than words. I told him about my mom, about the cancer that took her before I even finished college, about why I became a community nurse, because I hated feeling helpless, hated watching someone hurt and not being able to stop it. He stayed quiet the whole time. Then he asked one question that caught in my throat. "So who's the nurse for you, Ellie?" I didn't know what to say, maybe because no one had ever asked that before. After that day, I started noticing the smallest touches, like when he handed me a book on psychology, with a page marked that read, "People who help others the most are often the ones who never got helped." Like the time I told him I hated my birthday, how it always felt tied to loss. He didn't say anything, just quietly tuned the piano. That night, he played me a piece I'd never heard before. No words, no name. But it made me cry. I used to think I wasn't someone who got emotional easily, but then came a spring afternoon. I walked into his apartment to return a book, and froze. The room was tidier than usual. No flowers, no candles, no music. Just him sitting still in his wheelchair, a small box resting on his lap. "Ellie," he said, voice calm and deep as always, but I could hear a slight tremble at the edge. "I can't take you somewhere grand, but I can make your heart feel safe. Every day." I looked at him, then at the box. Inside was a simple ring, no jewels, nothing fancy. He lifted his eyes to mine and asked softly, "Will you marry me?" I laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that comes through tears. I used to think I needed someone who'd make my heart race. Turns out what I really needed was someone who could calm it. "Yes," I whispered, "but I still like chocolate protein bars more than strawberry." He smiled, a real smile. Not a smirk, not a guarded grin, just warm, gentle, and heartbreakingly human. News of the proposal spread fast among my close friends. They all asked the same 10 questions. "Are you sure? Do you love him? Do you even know what he has besides a wheelchair?" I didn't blame them. I understood. To the outside world, my choice probably looked irrational. A young, independent nurse marrying a man who was cold, mysterious, job unknown, and in a wheelchair. Someone even said it straight to my face. "You're giving up every chance at a normal life." I just smiled, because none of them knew. It was through him that I finally started to feel truly alive. I didn't choose a normal life. I chose a life where my heart could be heard. On the day we signed our marriage papers, he wore a white shirt, hair neatly combed, and didn't talk more than usual. But when the clerk asked, "Are you sure you want to sign this?" he turned to me, took my hand, and said, "She's the only one who ever offered me protein without needing to know who I was." I almost laughed, then almost cried. We didn't have a grand wedding, just a small dinner at a little Italian place he'd rented out where he said, "This place makes lasagna like my mom used to." We cut the cake with a dinner knife, toasted with water instead of wine, and danced a cha-cha, me standing, him sitting, yet somehow we still moved in perfect rhythm. Love didn't arrive like fireworks. It came like the kitchen light left on when you get home late, like a handwritten note on the table that says, "Are you okay?" I used to think love had to shake you to your core, but then I realized some people don't need to chase you or shout to be seen. Sometimes all they have to do is stay still, and somehow you find yourself wanting to walk toward them. And for me, That person was him. Hold up. Pause for a second. If you're still listening at this point, do you think this love moved a little too fast? I mean, I kinda like it fast like this. If you're with me on that, drop a love in the comments. I used to believe that when two people love each other enough, when they marry out of trust, the quiet moments wouldn't hurt. I used to believe that until the quiet between me and him got too long and too many things stopped making sense. After the day we signed the marriage papers, everything stayed as simple as the way he proposed. No wedding dress, no party, no honeymoon, and I didn't need any of that. He was still him, quiet, gentle in his own way, always making me feel safe. And I was still me, a nurse who woke up before the alarm, tied her hair with a rubber band instead of silk, and could cook exactly 3 things: instant noodles, egg noodles, and freestyle spaghetti. We stayed in that old apartment for a few more months, shared routines, comfortable silences, and nights lying next to each other listening to the wind slip through the window. I didn't need him to change. He didn't ask me to either. But then, I started to notice. It was a late night. I woke up at 3 a.m. because I was thirsty. As I passed through the living room, I saw the desk lamp still on. He was sitting in front of his laptop, a soft blue light casting shadows on his intensely focused face. On the screen was a command line interface. Not Excel, not Word, but something I couldn't make sense of. Just symbols and code. I stepped in quietly and joked to break the tension. "Are you hacking NASA or something?" He killed the screen instantly. Not by closing the laptop. He used a key combo that shut it off completely. His eyes looked at me like he didn't recognize me for a second. "Just checking a few things," he said, his voice lower than usual. "What kind of things?" I laughed nervously. "If it's a movie, you don't need to be that secretive." He stared at me for a long moment, then shifted the subject. "You shouldn't be up this late?" Just that one sentence. He turned off the desk lamp, wheeled himself into the bedroom, and I just stood there, glass of water growing cold in my hand, my heart cooling with it, minute by minute. In the days that followed, I started noticing the little things I'd missed before. His phone had 2 SIM cards, but I'd only ever seen one. Every time it rang with an unfamiliar number, he'd step out onto the balcony and speak in French, fluent French, which I didn't even know he could speak. One time, while we were out shopping, I saw a man in a black suit standing by the parking lot for way too long. It wasn't until we were leaving that the man followed us, opened the car door for him, and drove behind us for several blocks. He never mentioned the man. When I asked, he simply said, "An old friend." I started to feel shut out. I didn't need to know what my husband did for a living, but I needed to know if whatever he was hiding had anything to do with the way he looked at me, like something inside him was never fully at peace. We didn't fight, but our conversations got shorter. I told him about my patients. He listened. But when I asked where he'd been after being gone for days, he just said, "It's personal, Ellie. Don't worry." I hated that sentence. I'm his wife. If I'm not allowed to worry, then what am I? One weekend afternoon, I came home earlier than expected. He wasn't there. His laptop was still open on the desk, screen unlocked. I'm not the type to invade someone's privacy. But I did it. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I needed a reason to stop questioning everything. On the screen was an open email alongside a string of data titled Project Black Sand, Q2 Internal Report. In the top corner was a logo, not from any medical or standard tech company I knew, but from one of the biggest global tech corporations. I recognized the name because just last week, the news said the company's CEO had bought a soccer team. I clicked on the photo section, a folder titled Monaco 2019. And then, my heart stopped for a second. In one photo, he was shaking hands with the man the world calls the richest billionaire in Europe. He was standing, not in a wheelchair. Back straight, confident smile, his face full of life. I don't know how long I stared at that image. When the door opened behind me and he walked in, I didn't feel afraid. I just felt hollow. He wasn't surprised to see me there. He quietly closed the laptop and asked, "How much do you know?" I didn't answer. I didn't even know where to begin. The fake wheelchair? The secret calls? The fact that I married someone I clearly didn't know at all? "So it was all fake?" I asked, my voice catching. "Even the man I fell in love with?" He stayed silent for a long time. Then he spoke. softly, like a cut that doesn't bleed. The only thing that was real was that I loved you. I turned away, my chest tightening like someone had twisted something deep inside. I didn't know if love could be strong enough to make someone stay, but I knew one thing for sure. Lies could definitely be strong enough to make someone leave. And I was standing right on that edge, between loving and letting go, between real and fake, between the man who once made my heart tremble and a secret big enough to wash it all away. I thought I knew him. Not completely, but at least enough to believe what he shared with me was real. I used to think love was built on patience and trust, like we had done. But everything collapsed in a single night, when the curtain of secrecy dropped, and I realized I wasn't part of his world at all. I was just someone standing outside the window, looking in. After I saw that photo, him standing next to that famous billionaire, his legs clearly uninjured, his expression completely different from the man I lived with every day. We stopped feeling like a married couple. We became two people sharing a space inside a relationship full of hesitation, avoiding each other's eyes and burying everything in a silence too deep for words to fix. I didn't leave that day. I still came home. Still boiled water, still washed the dishes, still asked, "You hungry?" like nothing had shattered. But inside me, every question he didn't answer, every time he left the room to avoid me, those were cracks spreading wide. I knew he was waiting for me to snap, to scream, to cry, to accuse him. But I didn't. I couldn't scream when what I felt wasn't rage, it was hurt, deep down to the root. Finally, on a Saturday night, he sat down beside me in the living room. No music, no soft lights, just the two of us in a room so cold, the ticking clock felt like it was screaming. "I'll tell you everything," he said. I nodded, without looking at him. He told me everything, that he was the sole heir to Hawthorne Industries, a global tech conglomerate specializing in AI and cybersecurity. He used to lead their artificial intelligence division, a rising star in the tech world, until an accident 3 years ago, caused by a software vulnerability he was personally responsible for. The car got hacked, spiraled out of control. The crash nearly killed him and left him unable to walk for a long time. But the worst part wasn't the wheelchair, it was the hit to his own sense of trust in himself. He withdrew from the tech scene, refused to take over the company, cut ties with the media, and disappeared under a new name, Andrew Clark, not Alexander Hawthorne, the name on his birth certificate. "I chose this life," he said, "because I didn't want anyone to love me for the money or fear me for the power." I looked up at him. "And so you chose to lie to me?" He said nothing. I went on. "I didn't love you because of the wheelchair. I loved you because of the way you looked at me, like I was someone worth loving. But now I have to ask myself, how much of what we had was real? And how much was just a role you were playing?" My voice didn't shake, but my hands were ice cold. "I never asked for anything. I don't need a mansion. I don't need to know how much money you have in the bank. I just need to know I'm not misplaced in someone's life." He lowered his head, hands clenched on his lap. The wedding ring still sat on his fourth finger, like a cruel little reminder. I stood up. "I won't ask for more. I don't want an apology. I just want peace." I walked into the bedroom, slipped the ring off my finger, placed it on the nightstand. Not because I stopped loving him, but because I couldn't keep loving someone when I didn't know who I was loving. I left a small note behind. Not long, not dramatic, just one line. "The one thing you can't buy is my trust." And then I left the apartment, carrying a pain no one could see and a heart that needed to heal with truth, not pretty words. When I walked out the door, he didn't follow. Maybe because he couldn't, or maybe he didn't dare to. But I didn't look back to find out. All I knew was that night, the city felt quieter than usual. And I, someone who used to believe love was everything, suddenly understood. Sometimes, love isn't enough to save a relationship built on something false, even if every emotion inside it was real. If you're still listening, would you have walked away like I did? Comment yes if you think Ellie was right to leave, or no if you believe true love is worth staying and forgiving. I really want to know which way your heart leans. I thought walking away once would be enough to close everything. But in the days that followed, I realized some things can't be left behind. Like the sound of the piano he used to play every night, or the way he made my coffee just right. No sugar, no cream, just strong and honest. I moved into a small apartment near the hospital where I worked. Didn't bring much with me, just a few clothes, the old cassette player my mom left behind, and the playlist he once sent me when I couldn't sleep. I didn't reach out. He didn't call. But I knew. He would come. Someone like him, cold, guarded, but when he loves, he doesn't let things drift away like wind. And I was right. Tuesday evening, just as my shift ended, I saw him waiting outside my building. Same wheelchair, same face. But this time, there was something different in it. A strange mix of exhaustion and worry. I meant to walk past him. But he spoke. "You can yell at me later, but please, just hear me out first." I stopped. "I was going to stay silent forever," he began, "because I was scared, not of you, but of losing the one thing I wasn't willing to trade, the feeling of just being a regular man, not a Hawthorne." My hands clenched. He still used that name, the name I found out too late. "I never needed you to be anyone," I said. "I just needed you to stop pretending. You think hiding your entire identity is love?" He looked up, eyes meeting mine. "I wanted you to love me for who I am, not the name I carry, not the legacy I was born into. I lost everything in that crash, including myself. But when I met you, for the first time, I felt like I wasn't living someone else's life." I stayed silent, not because I was moved, but because I was angry. "Did you ever think maybe I had the right to know? The right to choose whether I wanted to love the real you or just a version you built?" He paused, just for a beat. "I was wrong, but if I'd told you the truth from the start, would you have stayed?" That question hit me like an arrow straight to the chest. I didn't know. "Maybe not," I said slowly, "but at least I wouldn't feel like I was just playing a role in a story you directed." We stood in silence for a few seconds. Then he asked, "If I had nothing, would you still want to walk this with me?" I looked at him. Those eyes, once the place I felt safest, now just a storm of emotions. Hope, fear, and a quiet kind of pleading. "Stop asking hypothetical questions, Alexander," I said. "Because this isn't about what you have or don't have. It's about the fact that I don't know who you are, and right now, I'm not sure you do either." His fingers trembled slightly as they rested on the wheel of his chair. "I never thought I'd fall in love again after everything. But you made me want to live honestly, to start over. I just didn't know how to begin without losing you." I turned away, heart tangled up in every direction. Part of me wanted to forgive him, to hold him like before, to say it would all be okay. But another part, the part that had been bruised by silence, secrecy, and the words he never said, knew I couldn't pretend none of it happened. "You might be ready to start over," I said, "but I'm not ready to trust again." I turned away, for the second time. But this time, it wasn't out of anger. It was because I needed to figure out what my heart truly needed. The man who once made me believe in something simple, or the man full of secrets trying to fix it all with truth that came too late. That night, I lay stretched out on the couch in my tiny apartment, listening to the old recording my mom once left me. "Don't be afraid to love, Ellie, but don't love if it means losing yourself." I thought about him, about the way he went quiet when I was hurting, about how he fixed the cassette player without ever asking for anything in return, about how he always left a seat beside him, even when he didn't know if I'd ever come back. And I cried, not out of regret, but out of tenderness, for someone who had once been my peace, and somehow also the one who made me lose it. I always thought I wasn't the kind of person who looked back. Once I walked away, I'd keep going. No turning around, no second guessing. But some things, they don't let you leave them completely. Like a look that still shows up in your dreams, a song that never really stops playing in your mind, or a man who once made your heart slow down, just by being quietly there. The day I came back, it had just started snowing. Not much, just a few soft flakes landing on my sleeve. Just enough to remind me of the first time he gave me a pair of gloves. Light gray, velvet soft, and somehow warmer than anything I ever expected him to give. I stood in front of the familiar door of our old apartment. My hand gripped the gloves tightly, the same gloves that had followed me to my new place, through sleepless nights, and all the way to this moment when I decided I wasn't going to run anymore. I knocked. Not loud, but just enough for him to hear. And when the door opened, I saw him, still in the wheelchair, his hair a little longer, his face a little thinner, But his eyes, they were still the same eyes that once made me feel truly seen. I didn't say a word. I just reached out and placed the gloves on his lap. He looked down at them, then up at me. No questions, no tears, just silence, but this time, a silence full of hope. "I love you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "not because you once had everything, but because you were willing to let it all go to find me." It wasn't a forgiveness speech, and it wasn't some fairy tale ending. It was a beginning, again. But this time, no lies, no masks, just two people with all their scars choosing to walk toward each other. We left the city 2 months later. Not to run away, but to start something that actually meant something. A small mountain town, an old building renovated into a community center, and a simple sign out front, "Restart, nobody is left behind." We founded a nonprofit for people with disabilities, for those recovering from injury, and for anyone who'd ever felt forgotten by the world. Not just material support, but connection. The feeling of being seen, being heard, the way he once saw and heard me, back when all we had were quiet piano notes and a guarded, unreadable stare. Alexander was no longer hiding. He went public with his past, his name, and the pain he used to bury beneath aliases. And me? I was no longer the nurse who had to be strong all the time. I learned how to share, how to be vulnerable when I needed to be, and how to love without keeping my guard up. We didn't go back to anything flashy, no mansion, no media appearances, no front row seats at big events. But every day when we saw a paralyzed child paint their first picture, or a single mother cry after landing her first job since the accident, we knew our love was multiplying in every hand we helped hold steady. At night, he still played the piano. I still sat beside him, complaining that the song was too sad, asking if he could play something else. And he still gave that soft smile, the one I used to think was distant, but now I knew. It was the little door he left open, just for me to walk through. One day, while sorting through old things, I found the cassette player he once fixed for me. It still worked, still played my mother's voice, clear as ever. Love is when you see someone's flaws and still choose to stay. I looked over at him. That man, with all his imperfections, had become the part of me I couldn't live without. Some people pass through your life like a breeze, here one moment, gone the next. But then there are others who stay. Not because they're perfect, but because you choose to see the truest parts of them and still love, still trust, still show up. Love, after all, isn't measured by what we give each other on the bright days. It's measured by how we stay on the cold, rainy ones when wounds surface and trust has to be stitched back together with nothing but honesty. If you've ever loved someone not for what they had, but for how they made you feel like yourself, you'll understand why Ellie came back. Not because forgiveness is easy, but because love is a brave choice. What about you? Do you believe a love that's been broken can still heal if both people are willing to try? Leave a comment. Love again if you believe everyone deserves a second chance. Move on if you believe that sometimes letting go is how we love ourselves better. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Love Stories for more real magical love stories just like this one. Because love is a journey, and you don't have to walk it alone. Thank you for being here with us.